Last week we explored how we regulate together our shimmering selves across the vastness of space and the mystery of time. And we breathed together, and we heard Suzuki Roshi's words, "Calmness of mind is beyond the end of your exhalation." And I wonder if some of you have been practicing with that this week. Today I want to broadly explore intimacy, and I'd like to start with somewhere we're not today and then move to somewhere we are. If you've been to a retreat or to a zendo or to a sesshin, you will know that there's a particular form that we inhabit, that we follow. So I'm thinking we bow to our seats and the room as we sit down. And once we've sat down, when people come to be beside us, we see them in our peripheral vision and we bow to them as they sit down. But we may never see them face to face. We're sitting looking either at a wall or into a circle or towards an altar. And there are these two presences beside us. And it's possible to sense the difference between your right and left side. There's a visceral sense I have of the person, the people beside me. So it's not visual, but there's something very intimate happening in a different way. I'm seeing them with my other senses. And then we get up and we follow one of those people during walking again and again. And it's possible to become quite intimate with their back and their neck, and to be really amazed by the possibilities of seeing someone not from the front, from the back. And we notice how they walk, the unique way they inhabit themselves, again and again, and then back to our seats. And if after some time those people came to sit beside me, either in a retreat or on a park bench, I would have a knowingness about them, even though I may never have spoken to them or seen them face to face. There's an intimacy that happens in the Zendo, which is very potent and very, very beautiful. So let's move to where we are today. I wonder how it was for you before you arrived this afternoon, perhaps the 5 minutes before you logged on. And when you arrive, what do you do? When I arrive, even if I'm offering a talk, I scroll to the other pages to see who's here. And I have various levels of delight. Oh, there's Trevor, there's Catherine, there's Mary. I'm delighted at people I've never actually met in person, but I have a sense of you from being with you online. There is an intimacy of being online together. And I was thinking about the whole statement about gallery view. You're in the gallery, all of you, in your own painting, and you're also viewing the others. So you're both seen and seeing at the same time, which seems to me quite unique in these times. Something that's been created since we've been meeting online. Gallery view. So I'd like to take you out this afternoon to the National Gallery of Scotland in Edinburgh. I've got tickets and we're going to see a painting I love very much, and whenever I'm in Edinburgh I like to go and see it. And I want you to imagine that we're walking along the gallery and this painting is at the end of one gallery and looks straight at you through the gallery, and Maria is going to show the painting to you now. And so what happens when this happens is I completely lose my notes. So I'm going to tell you about it with the kind of intimacy of not having a script at all. So this is the Rembrandt self-portrait of 1655 when he was around 50. And at that time he'd suffered a lot of loss. He'd lost his wife Saskia and 3 infant children, and his finances were in turmoil. So this is one of the great Rembrandt late self-portraits, looking back at us over more than three centuries. So let's just for a moment pause, because it invites, for me, a silence. Let's just look at this beautiful, intimate painting. And now Maria is going to invite Rembrandt to join us in inquiry by making him inquiry size. So there he is. So my question to you, having seen the larger painting, is if Rembrandt came to inquiry, what would he want to ask? What would be his inmost request? So thank you, Maria. If you can move that forward, thank you. I have a lot of gratitude to the writer John Berger, who helped me have eyes to see these things. And he said Rembrandt was sustained by a vague hope, an intuition that later it would be others who would look at him with a compassion he could not allow himself, and for others read us. So we're going from Edinburgh now, we're going across the North Sea to Amsterdam, to the Vermeer exhibition at the Rijksmuseum. And this exhibition is completely sold out because it shows 28 of the 37 extant paintings in this one exhibition. And Johannes Vermeer lived from 1632 to 1675, and he was able to create these intimate interiors and simultaneously gateways into people's own interior worlds. The director of the museum says he was able to create an intimacy that was never seen before. He captures the moment and makes it timeless. And I would recommend, if you're interested, just go to the museum piece about it. It's very beautiful, and it For me, it makes me feel quite tearful watching this amazing exhibition that I can't actually go to in real time. So Maria is now going to show us a painting of Vermeer's called Woman Reading a Letter, 1662. Let's spend a few moments just standing in front of this painting and just appreciating it. And we're now going to invite this young woman to join inquiry and make her inquiry size to our inquiry this afternoon. Okay, thank you, Maria. So we've been to two galleries this afternoon, and there's a there's a particular creativity and um, invitation when we look at anybody to um, to look with loving presence, to look with care. So it's a very creative process. I've been reading a book about Brighton in the Second World War, and there's a prisoner who's been allowed to create a fresco. And he says, I tell myself that the colour in a fresco is dependent on the most minute of things, that it is catalyzed by the light of the onlooker's gaze, by the carbon of their breath, by the speed or calm of their hearts. So there's a life that happens between, it's catalyzed by the light of the onlooker's gaze. So what I'd invite you to do now, and by leaving your camera on, you're indicating that you want to do this. I would like to invite you to pin somebody in the gallery. You can go to the top right hand corner of their picture and you will see pin. I'd like to invite you, just as we've watched and looked at the Rembrandt self-portrait and the woman reading a letter, just for a moment to look with that same attention at somebody in this room who's giving their permission to be seen and who at the same time is seeing. And then I invite you with a bow to move away and come back into the room. Thank you. So to return to the woman reading a letter, Suzuki Roshi wrote, "We have a term, shosoku, which is about the feeling you have when you receive a letter from home. Even without an actual picture, you know something about your home, what people are doing there, or which flowers are blooming. That is shosoku. Although we have no actual written communications from the world of emptiness, we have some hints or suggestions about what is going on in that world. And that is, you might say, enlightenment. When you see a plum blossom, or hear the sound of a small stone hitting bamboo, that is a letter from the world of emptiness. Perhaps we could say, when you see a presence shimmering on gallery view, or hear the sound of Maria ringing the bell, that is a letter from the world of emptiness. And Suzuki Roshi goes on to say, what Buddha said was just a letter from the world of emptiness, just a suggestion or some help from him. If someone else reads it, it may not make sense. That is the nature of Buddha's words. To understand Buddha's words, we cannot rely on our usual thinking mind. If you want to read a letter from Buddha's world, it is necessary to understand Buddha's world. So perhaps a Dharma talk is a letter from home, a letter from Buddha's world, a letter from emptiness that we can't realize with our intellect. Perhaps in our galleries tonight, today, this morning, we are letters from emptiness. We are form that arises from emptiness, and we return to it. And I think that's where I want to stop. Thank you very much.
We have Joel.
Hi, Joel.
Thank you. Josh, this is so wonderful. Thank you so much. To start with those very evocative visuals from Rembrandt and from Vermeer, so touching. And the quote from the writer that you read about Rembrandt, hoping for compassion that he couldn't allow himself. Very, very moving. And then the Suzuki Roshi quote that you ended with is one of my favorites, and one that I was reading it last week at one point, and I thought, I'm going to stop reading Buddhist writings. I'm going to stop reading sutras. I'm just going to go out and look around and just pay attention to what's going on. Those are the letters from emptiness. The Buddhist writer, or at least the Zen writers, are saying, I can't convey in words what's going on. And maybe I should shout at you or hit you with a stick, but maybe it's not worth the trouble. But go someplace where there's no grass. Go someplace where there's no heat, or the heat kills you, or like that. Anyway, a perfect explication. I'm so deeply moved. Thank you.
Really, really appreciate what you're sharing, Joel, because I think more and more I'm finding just my life, what I'm interested in, what I'm passionate about, reveals the Dharma. It's more effortless in that sense. It's all there, and I love the way you kind of express that. I'm going to stop, not necessarily stop reading Buddhist books, but there's a time to just go and find what's there, isn't there?
There's the finger and the moon, and I spend all my time looking at the finger, is what I feel like. And the moon is there, It's always there.
Yeah, there's me next.
Anyway, we, we got through that somehow.
I did.
Thank you for all the technical work you did to create those images and make them small, and yeah, really grateful.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was a lovely exercise to do, and I love the exercise that you asked us to do when you asked us to pin somebody.
Mm.
And I pinned a dear friend, Lynn Flocky,
Mm.
and I was sat looking at Lynn, and as I was sat with her, I could feel my body settling,
Mm.
and and it just how we do really regulate each other, and that kind of, and we're on Zoom, but I really felt that intimacy and that settling, and there was something about feeling that settling so that I can see clearly what we carry with us all the time, our reactivity and reverberations of the world. And then when we just take a moment to just be and stop,
Mm.
that we can begin to see past the tangled display, that we create, that peace that's always there behind that tangled display. And I really felt that when I was doing that exercise with Lynn, and with the Rembrandt photograph, when you've explained his story, and the sadness and the what he'd been through, and what connection that created for me with that picture. I felt a really deep connection of humanity, of loss, of everything that we all go through. We all go through everything. And I really felt that deep connection that I might have missed if you hadn't have brought this
Mm.
and explained that.
Mm.
And something about when we do get to really be with our own suffering and conditioning, how that can really help and support us to really be with others
Mm.
more intimately and closely, because there's like a deeper understanding of what's you is me. We all go through, we all feel the same things,
Mm.
and it just gives us that real deeper sense of intimacy that you're talking about.
That's really beautiful to hear. I think we can, the word gallery view can just sort of pass us by, and we don't really think, you know, what is that? What does that mean? Um,
Mhm.
and I think you've really expressed that in your experience of the beautiful opportunities that are in this community for connection in
Mm.
this pretty unique way.
If we come back to our breath, exhale and rest at the
Mm.
end of that exhalation, like you talked about last week, so
Mm.
that we can just connect in that moment at that point more deeply.
Mm. Mm.
Mm.
Very much.
Thank you so much. Looks like we have Ed next from Hawaii.
Hi, Ed.
Unmute. Okay. Hi,
Hi.
Josh.
Good to see you.
To be seen but not heard.
Mm.
Just, I guess, to start, just thank you very much. Wonderful presentation, wonderful content, wonderful guiding. And if I'm not misinterpreting or what was being said, it seemed that you're intimating that there can be or should be in some way at some time a turning outward, but with intimacy, um, so that we can get to a point to be more connected, if you will,
Mm.
with being able to turn inward, to be able to appreciate that inward language, which is without words, and it's an inward language of relationship and intimacy. But
Mm.
sometimes it's going out to see the Vermeer picture and see how that moves you back inward.
Yeah, that's beautifully put, because I think those paintings for me, create a kind of chiming or vibration in myself of something, they meet me. So I feel like you're kind of expressing, that process very beautifully.
Thank you. There is, and I know when I see something like seeing that that Rembrandt, and I saw a photograph from someone yesterday on Instagram, and there's a very familiar and deep kind of vibrational resonance that happens inside, which I don't have a label for, don't need a label for it actually, but that connection is there, and it starts that whole level of intimacy. And
yeah, and it's interesting, you know, that we look at it, and you've described, you know, not having words for it. It's you stand before something like that, and it just invites silence, but a kind of very potent silence, which you know is very connecting and very beautiful, particularly over three centuries. You know, it's like, oh, you know, the fact that he was incredibly successful after his death. You know, it's like it it's heartbreaking. Also,
yeah, it is.
he's like us. You know, he's you know.
Yeah, I may not be the world's second richest billionaire from my images while I'm alive, but who knows afterwards.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to connect with you today.
And for me.
Hi, Lynn.
Thank you, Josh. It's, I really love traveling with you. And yeah, the portraits make me want to cry. And I was just struck by that sense of everything arising from emptiness and going back to it. And I guess I just wanted to sit with you. Two forms arising from emptiness, and at some point we'll return to it, and the preciousness of the moments when we're still embodied and here in our human lives for the short time that we're here.
It's very precious to sit with you, Lynn, and to to feel the form and the emptiness just flowing backwards and forwards. And it was great to have that journey with you, and to have the opportunity to have my own inquiry, preparing a talk. It's a process, and the emptiness part, that kind of really struck me at the end. All of these images that just come and go. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your letter from emptiness.
And Katya's back.
Hi, Katya. You're back.
Yes, thank you. Not really sure how to articulate this, but thank you very much for the exercise. And I was really struck by how my emotional reaction to the first portrait changed when you told the story. It's a very familiar painting, and found it interesting. And then when you told of the loss and the surrounding story and the context, just feeling a softening and an opening and a tenderness, and really seeing then the face in a very different way. And I actually, Lynn, who just spoke, you were the person that I had pinned, and that tenderness and that openness I felt really carried on into that experiment in a really interesting way, and I appreciated that so much. And what an opportunity it is, and then a bit of I found that then quite scary, the stories we tell about people, the judgments we make about people, the biases, this, what our story is, how that can really impact how open and how we see that person. And so I think I'll be thinking about that a lot, and being aware of the stories, and how knowing the story changed completely my experience and the intimacy with that image. And
That's fascinating. Fascinating that you say that, because I was really wondering how much to say. There's the painting. What happens when you stand in front of the painting? It and there was quite a lot up that I read, and it's not an art history lecture. But how much to share, how much that a little bit of information changes what we see, whether it was in the service of what we were doing is a good, for me, a good question. Actually, I'm asking myself the question.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that shift was really profound. And so I'm glad you told it, but I understand that, because I did at first have my art history class lens on of, oh, look at the lighting and the hair and how skillfully that's done. And 1600s, who else was, so anyway, so it really humanized, brought an intimacy,
Yes.
which was exciting, a good reminder. And then like, I'm going to be thinking about that, and interacting with people.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you've given me something to wonder about. In our choice of what we share about people, and yeah, it's a really great question. And for me, I used to have this kind of assumption. Okay, great painter. For part of his life, I think he was very well recognized, and then oh, uh, the suffering, which I see in the painting.
Yeah. Yeah. And the, with, the stories we tell about people, I think in the US with our gun violence and this young, I don't even know if I want to bring it up, or maybe we do bring it up, but with others, with racial or marginalized folks, the stories we tell about each other, and how much power, and power for destruction and power for good, and knowing people's stories and connection is how we can get beyond those projections or biases and get to the open tenderness, maybe.
Wow, that is such a great question. Such a great question, because even a statement about a person is partial. Something I read, and I thought, oh, okay, a bit of context, but that's a great question. What are we going to share? How are we going to share it? Thank you. Hi, Marla.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much. At the very beginning of your talk, the description you gave of people who we might sit next to in a park bench without really having known them or spoken to them or knowing anything about them, and the sense of intimacy that you still have, reminds me of before Zoom, before the pandemic, we knew people that way in classrooms and concerts and worship services where we were all seated next to each other. And we might have a fellowship with those people, or we might go to a concert where we didn't know the people. So when our relationship switched to online, to the way we were looking at each other directly, there were some people who were really uncomfortable with that and who yearned to go back to the days of sitting next to each other instead of facing each other. And I found it really interesting how uncomfortable some people found that looking into the eyes.
Yes, yes.
I didn't really understand it because that's not my experience of it. But anyway, it just really struck me how much we've changed. I think a lot of us have.
Yeah, that's a really kind of helpful point about where we've come to, isn't it? And you know, I was thinking about the gallery thing. Is very often we don't get permission to look at people for very long. Socially, it's not acceptable. But there's something about the permission in gallery view and the exercise we did, which is um, is potentially very very intimate and very connecting.
And it's anonymous. That's important to remember, that we don't necessarily have permission sometimes to stare into someone else's eyes, but we do it anyway.
Yes, yeah. It's a very subtle and kind of skilled and nuanced activity, isn't it? That requires a lot of sensitivity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Francis.
You ask about both of those paintings, what their question would be if they came to inquiry. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, I'm not, of course, don't know, because I'm not even sure if I could verbalize my own questions. But part of the intimacy with them is that I think their questions would be the same as ours are.
Yeah, I think
without
so.
much, without much difference, really. And that's what our connection is through the centuries and through the days now. But the Rembrandt painting, when I first saw that painting, it's harsh. He's an old man, and not necessarily today, because I was familiar with the painting, but after you, without even knowing the story, after you study it, really look into his eyes, you see a softness. And there is that point of contact with your own pain that you've had with life. They were both very wonderful paintings to have chosen.
I appreciate it that you've mentioned the eyes. There's something very connecting in the painting about the Rembrandt self-portrait.
Yes.
It invites meeting somehow.
I feel that he sees me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And you see him. So there's some, it feels to me like there's some flow going on between you when you see him.
Not unlike Zoom, where we have just really just an image. And like Marla said, I mean, I really, the first time I came forward on inquiry, when I saw myself get large, I was like, oh, wait, maybe I don't want to be here. I want to be seen so much.
Yeah, it can be triggering for us. Zoom.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's triggering. I get that. Yeah. It's good to meet you.
Thank you. I always enjoy when you do your presentation. Just the sound of your voice, the cadence that you have is very comforting and very close. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. It's really good to meet you and to see your eyes.
I think Catherine might be trying to come forward. I think she's pressed the wrong button. We'll check, shall we?
Bye.
Well, thank you, Josh. I felt reluctant to come forward because of what the Vermeer painting had called forward in me. So I felt that I didn't feel a connection with the woman. I felt a connection with Vermeer. I felt he was painting silence, a particular full silence, hanging. And it reminded me of many years ago, we were both in a day of something or other, and you handed me something, and I can't even remember what it was. I remember this feeling of time expanding and being very full and almost endless. Just, So I think the question of the painting is, what is this? What is this that can happen? You know, what Suzuki Roshi calls the letter from emptiness.
Yeah.
I think that's Vermeer's question. Yeah. And
sorry, carry on.
so what touches me a lot is that we can call it up in each other.
Yes.
It doesn't belong to us, but we can. Yeah, I think call it up is the word I want to use. Call it up between. Yeah.
I think I can't remember what I handed you, but I know we've had many of those moments over the years where something like that happens. It's very beautiful to be reminded, but also how potent everything can possibly be, including seeing a picture of a painting in an exhibition.
I think for me the challenge is seeing it. I quite often feel it in things that I consider to be aesthetically beautiful, like the Vermeer or a Morandi painting is another kind of example. For me, the challenge is seeing it in the ugly and where it's less obviously where this is less obviously accessible.
Yes.
I think that's the challenge for me.
Great challenge, great question.
plastic owls, etc. You know, yeah.
Plastic owls. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Joshi.
It's been wonderful to be with you these last 2 weeks, and thank you for being here and for offering yourselves to each other and this practice. And Flint, our teacher, returns next week. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I can feel a real sense of intimacy and closeness in this room with us all together after that wonderful talk from Josh. Thank you so much, Josh. That was just wonderful. And if you'd like to continue to meet and share for a further 30 minutes, please do pop yourself into gallery view, which will have a whole new meaning for you now. And we'll continue for a further 30 minutes. Thank you so much.